Hey everyone, it's Cassimus Lego, and this time I'm not doing my usual custom Lego minifigure review video. I wanted to take a step back and look at my Lord of the Rings custom Lego minifigure collection. This project began in December of 2020 and concluded in December of 2022, and featured characters from the most beloved fantasy trilogy of all time. I'll be taking a look at each and every one of my custom Lego minifigures, giving you some insights about how I made them and how I feel about them today. This project remains as one of my most favorite series I've done as a maker of custom Lego minifigures. So without any further ado, let's take a look at this collection. To begin the collection, let me show you the very first Lord of the Rings custom Lego minifigure that I ever made, and that would be Frodo Baggins from the Fellowship of the Ring. This minifigure was somewhat of a step up for me because it was one of the first minifigures that fully utilized fabric elements, and in this minifigure's case, that being the jacket and the cape. This was also the first time I painted hair on the Hobbit's feet, and that strategy was carried on to every Hobbit Lego minifigure I made after this, all the way up until I made Bilbo Baggins. This Frodo minifigure had a basic Lego Sting sword, but I did paint the blade silver for some extra detail. And then of course he has the ring itself, so pretty standard but obvious accessories for the character. Out of the set I made for the Fellowship of the Ring custom Lego minifigure project, Frodo was always one of my favorites. Gandalf the Grey was one of the characters that I was really excited to make back when I started this project. Looking back on him now, I must admit that I'm not too happy with how I approached the hat and hair. I tried to sculpt some hair that came out of the hat, but it looks more like tentacles or something. Since then, I've seen better ways that people have done this, and I wish I had thought of something like that at the time. Thankfully, the rest of the minifigure looks nice, although today I would definitely do the robes differently. Additionally, that staff could have been a lot better. I didn't even bother using a brown rod to disguise the area for the minifigure hand, but regardless, I'm glad to have learned some things about this custom minifigure. When I made the second version of Gandalf the White, it was much closer to what I was hoping to make with this minifigure. For the first custom Lego minifigure of Aragorn, son of Arathorn, I remember having some trouble coming up with how I wanted him to look. I ended up choosing his appearance at Amon Hen. I liked this figure a lot, in fact. I painted various light brown wrinkles to highlight specific areas in the clothing. It's a very easy effect, and it's good at making the minifigure visually distinct. I added a sheath as well. It's just a piece of E-tape with some painted detail. The one thing that I do want to address is the hairpiece. Now, in the years since making him, I've switched out the painted version with a base dark brown color, but it still doesn't look exactly like Viggo Mortensen's hairstyle in the films. The reason I chose this piece was because at the time, I wanted to use more unique Lego hairstyles, and I really liked this one. Eventually, I did end up sculpting something for my latest Aragorn Lego minifigure, and you'll see it later on. Legolas, like Gandalf, was another character I was really looking forward to making. I made him very early on, so that original minifigure lacks some things like the knife sheaths and the arrow quiver. And even if I did decide to make them, I didn't modify the back of the hair to accommodate them back then. For the two towers, I finally updated the figure, and now he looks pretty awesome. I'm very proud of the gold painting on the quiver, and the 3D effects I created from the layers of E-tape for the sheaths. I also heavily modified the bow from that version. I attached a string to the bow arms and repainted the entire piece following the new simplistic style I was passionate about. Overall, I'm very pleased with the outcome of this custom Lego Legolas minifigure. Simply put, Gimli is a detailed custom Lego minifigure. He has a lot of paintwork on both sides of the torso, even though the beard somewhat obscures them. Actually, I modified the LEGO 2012 Gimli beard piece by cutting it down so that more of the torso was exposed. It works, but I didn't want to lose the detail in the beard mold, so I think I reached a pretty good compromise. Gimli uses LEGO's fantastic helmet, complete with the copper printing that surrounds the entire element. I made multiple axes for Gimli as well. I used to display this minifigure with the large double-sided axe, but I believe it broke at some point. So right now, he has the dual axes that were custom made based on the film props. One last detail I want to mention is that I gave Gimli Lego medium short legs to try to match the height of the dwarf next to the hobbits. Which, speaking of, we've come to my second Hobbit Lego custom minifigure, and that would obviously be the beloved gardener Samwise Gamgee. This is a favorite character of millions, myself included, and wouldn't you know it, this custom minifigure is actually my least favorite from the entire project. so much so that I don't even display him anymore. I had to dig him up from my minifigure archives for this video. Why is that? Well, it simply comes down to 3 things. The fabric jacket is really ugly, particularly on the left side of the minifigure. The bag strap just extends over the torso and jacket and doesn't even connect cleanly to the bag, and that backpack just looks really sloppy in my opinion. Obviously, I since made 2 more Sam custom minifigures, and they were significantly better. So yeah, this custom minifigure isn't my favorite, and I've always thought it was ironic considering how much I love this character. Next is Meriadoc Merry Brandybug. If I recall correctly, this was a very simple custom minifigure to make. In a sense, he was very similar to Frodo, as he has essentially the same vest, obviously now in bright yellow. The green jacket stands out very well from the other colors on the minifigure, and I also painted some minimal detail on the arms. Most of the custom minifigures use their original head prints from the 2012 LEGO Lord of the Rings line, but Merry was not the case. Given that the official LEGO Merry minifigure is highly collectible, not to mention expensive, I decided at the time to paint a Dominic Monaghan likeness myself, which I thought was passable, definitely not egregious, but not totally perfect either. At some point, I also switched out the painted hobbit hair for the same piece, but this time in a base nougat. Here is Peregrine Pippin Took. Between him and Merry, I was significantly more excited to make Pippin. He has a really cool painted fabric scarf piece, which to this day I'm really happy with. And I love the color for the jacket. It has a grayish hue, but it matches Pippin's outfit throughout the trilogy very well. Plus, it looks very nice when compared with the red fabric cape. The hairpiece was painted, however, which I tried to avoid today, but still, Pippin was a favorite of mine in the collection for a long time. Here is the last member of the Fellowship, Boromir of Gondor. At the time, I thought he was an incredibly detailed minifigure. However, I look back at this figure as being under-detailed. Take for instance, the boots. There's nothing going on there, not even a sole line. And of course, those gauntlets, which again have absolutely nothing on them. As you'll see later on with the Two Towers Aragorn custom minifigure, one of the mistakes that I wanted to correct was fleshing out Boromir's gauntlets. I probably didn't have to paint as much detail as I did for that minifigure, but I mean, maybe just some light brown outlines or something, they probably would have gone a long way. And also, no shield for him, though I was heavily tempted to give him the shield from the new Boromir LEGO minifigure. Maybe someday I'll bite. The Fellowship of the Ring custom minifigure project was always going to be just the Fellowship members themselves, but at the last minute, I hastily threw together Arwen Undomiel as I wanted a 10 minifigure lineup, plus I wasn't sure when I was going to get the chance to make her in the other projects. However, making Arwen without really planning on it resulted in an initially ugly minifigure. I used the nearest LEGO female head that I had, and did that makeshift hairpiece from the elf hair. Eventually, I did upgrade this custom minifigure to include the official Liv Tyler headprint and the hairpiece, and Arwen looks 10 times better with these additions. Even then, I still love how I made this minifigure in the dark blue elvish battle dress. We've moved on to the second entry in the Lord of the Rings custom LEGO minifigure project, and we can begin with Aragorn in his hunter outfit. The general look of this minifigure stayed pretty consistent to my previous Aragorn custom LEGO minifigure. As alluded to earlier, I really focused on detailing Boromir's gauntlets on this minifigure specifically. As you can see, I packed a massive amount of the miniature detail into these gauntlets, but also the surrounding forearms. From what I remembered, this process was extremely tedious, and was probably the reason I skipped an early morning class in university. Here is the next character outside of the Fellowship. It is Éomer of Rohan. For a while, I actually wasn't planning to make him. I initially wanted to include King Theoden in the Two Towers project, but when I stopped to consider the Return of the King minifigure lineup, it made much more sense to save King Theoden for that project. Thus, I made Éomer instead. This was, at the time, the most intricate custom minifigure to make for this project, featuring some sculpting, a modified off-brand Rohan soldier minifigure helmet, and a significant amount of painted details. One thing that I want to highlight is the face that I used, which is not the official LEGO Éomer headprint from the line, it's actually the alternate expression of Chris Pratt's Star-Lord. I used it because I thought it had a good resemblance to Karl Urban, and with a repainted beard, I still think it does the trick. Éowyn, his sister and niece to King Theoden, was bound to be included in my projects. This particular minifigure is not disguised as Durmhelm, however. I first made her depicting this dress for the Two Towers. The minifigure was very simple, although it's always a challenge to paint female faces. I think the likeness to Miranda Otto is alright, but it could be more expressive. To resemble the sleeves of the dress, I sculpted onto the arms. Beyond the painting on the torso, there's not much else to comment on. I didn't even make an accessory for her. This Eowyn custom minifigure was kind of like a prerequisite for when I'd made her as disguised as Durmhelm the next year. For the second version of Frodo Baggins, I made him as he appears throughout the Two Towers, and notably during the Siege of Osgiliath. This custom minifigure is mostly identical to the Fellowship variant, but this time the jacket is removed, revealing the vest underneath, and I made the Elvish cloak. I'm still really happy, especially at how the hood turned out. I also gave this minifigure a LEGO Sting minifigure element, but this time featuring some unique painted blade detail. Making different versions of these characters gave me the opportunity to display them with unique facial expressions, so the Two Towers version of Frodo has an aggressive expression. Now this custom Samwise Gamgee minifigure was definitely an improvement from the last one. He basically replaces the Fellowship minifigure in my display. As I mentioned before, I wanted to fix some of my grievances from the previous minifigure. So for instance, I put the straps underneath the fabric jacket and then removed the bag altogether. The jacket this time is painted to resemble his white vertical striped jacket as worn at Osgiliath. It turned out much cleaner than I expected, and even still, I'm very proud of it. The backpack was heavily redesigned, although it's sculpted basically the same. And as a unique detail, it's the only time I used a portion of the official LEGO backpack minifigure element, and I used it for the blanket. Between the two Samwise Gamgee minifigures so far, it's clear that the Two Towers version is better in basically every way, but I'm curious how you think it compares to the Return of the King minifigure, which you'll see later on. Way before starting the Two Towers custom minifigure project, I was very excited to modify the LEGO Gollum minifigure. This is the base from the 2012 LEGO Lord of the Rings line, and it has a fantastic expression. In reality, he didn't require too much work. All I did was repaint the brown cloth and added some other rips and tears. And I mean, that was about it. I could have weathered him, as he would have definitely benefited from it, but at the time I was still extremely selective about weathering my custom LEGO minifigures, and even now it's rare that I do it. I've never really liked adding gritty detail to the LEGO minifigure parts. I like them looking clean and smooth. Maybe someday I'll return to this minifigure and add the appropriate weathering detail, but for now, he'll continue looking like he just came out of the shower. Here is the captain of the Rangers of Ithilien, Faramir of Gondor. At the time that I made him, I didn't think much of the character, but he's grown on me a lot more since. I want to highlight the Tree of Gondor on the torso. I ended up painting this symbol a few times, and for the first, I think it turned out super accurate. Additionally, I was given the joy of painting another set of his brother's gauntlets, although the surrounding detail was not as challenging to paint like on Aragorn. Here's another fun Marvel cameo, it's Thor. Of course, Faramir was not played by Chris Hemsworth, but I thought this expression was close enough to David Wenham. I think at this point I was trying to cut down on creating unique painted faces, as they are pretty tedious at times. The hair is the Mad Eye Moody LEGO minifigure hairpiece painted in chestnut, although he would look a lot more appropriate with the same hairpiece that Boromir had. Alright, so Sauron the White was a somewhat tricky character to make, and that all comes down to the painted white fabric. I've never liked painting fabric this color, it's always way too thick. Custom minifigures like this inspired me to eventually look for base fabrics to use instead. Today I would do this minifigure totally different. I mean, the cape is pretty poor, and you can very clearly see on the torso where the fabric stops to allow the hairpiece to slide on effortlessly. However, I do like how the staff turned out. I sculpted the various extensions and the center sphere. And regardless, I always enjoy getting the opportunity to make iconic characters and their performers as custom LEGO minifigures. Rounding off the Two Towers custom minifigures, here is Grima Wormtongue. From what I remember, he was the simplest minifigure in this project, and I probably made him in just a single day. There really wasn't much for me to do. I sculpted the neck collar, and while I think the texture is a nice inclusion, I don't think it looks all too great. Additionally, this chain is just too big, and not to mention, he has a painted cape rather than a basic LEGO black cape. I did get to use the official LEGO face print, so that's a plus. I think he deserves an upgrade, but there lies the tragedy about these uglier LEGO custom Lord of the Rings minifigures from me. I will likely never return to every single one of them. My most recent Aragorn minifigure depicts his Gondor battle armor worn at the end of the Return of the King. Out of my 3 custom minifigures, this version is my favorite. I really love the painted of Gondor on the blue fabric, and beyond that, the armor sculpting and additional 3D elements came out really good. As I mentioned earlier, this Aragorn custom minifigure features a custom sculpted hairpiece. While I do agree that it looks a bit more accurate to Viggo Mortensen's hairstyle in the trilogy, I think the standard hairpiece element LEGO uses for the character would have worked out just fine. Another unique aspect with this custom Aragorn minifigure is the reformed Anduril. This sword accessory marks the first time that I took advantage of 3D printing my own minifigure accessories. Sure, the print could be smoother, but I thought for my first attempt, it turned out very cool. As for Aragorn, I love the final results of each of my custom minifigures. This minifigure is the second attempt at Gandalf the White, and this minifigure is more in line with how I use fabric elements today. He has a white overcape, but I was still playing with materials at the time, so it's not as good as I'd like. As for the other additions, the white staff is from the old Lord of the Rings Minimates line, which I used to replace the original staff that I made from a LEGO rod element. I don't think I further modified the LEGO beard and hair combo element between versions. To remind you, for the first version, I pretty much cut the beard in half and resculpted it to reveal more of the painted torso. This minifigure is a great example of myself experimenting with more base fabric elements to approximate capes and cloaks, which I've begun to use more consistently with Jedi and some of my other Harry Potter custom LEGO minifigures. For the Return of the King project, it was time for me to make Frodo Baggins as he appears during his final steps towards Mount Doom, and this time around, I pretty much let myself do whatever I wanted, which included adding some additional unique details. For one, I went ahead and weathered this minifigure pretty significantly. You can't have Frodo as he appears at the climax of the trilogy without representing the physical ramifications the character went through. Additionally, I painted some cuts on his face, and the massive scars that appeared around Frodo's neck for carrying the ring. Overall, I'm really pleased with this custom minifigure, but his accessory to me is just really cool. I've wanted to make a way for my Frodo custom minifigures to dangle the ring from a chain since the beginning of the project, so for the finale, I finally gave it a shot. I like it a lot even if the glue holding the chain together is a little bit chunky. Now that you've seen each Frodo Baggins custom LEGO minifigure that I've made, let me know which is your favorite. For the last version of Samwise Gamgee, I let myself do whatever I wanted. I based this figure particularly on his appearance during the Shelob attack scenes. So for accessories, I gave him the Phial of Galadriel, which was made using a LEGO transparent bar element paired with an upside down transparent LEGO jewel element. And then Sam also has a basic sword with the blade painted in silver. Sam also has a lot of weathering details such as on the feet and torso. And of course, I made the backpack one final time, and because I had already so much practice making Sam's backpack in the past, this version is by far the best and is my favorite for sure. One new addition to my custom LEGO Return of the King Sam minifigure is the use of a base LEGO Hobbit hairpiece in Nougat, as by this point, I wanted to stop painting hairpieces if I didn't have to. That's it for all of my custom LEGO Samwise Gamgee minifigures. The Return of the King project came around, and thus it was time for me to attempt making the King of Rohan during the Third Age of Middle-earth, Lord Theoden. I'll say right away, this was a challenging minifigure. There is a massive amount of hand-painted detail that I packed into this custom minifigure. Along with the paintwork, Theoden has a fabric waistcoat to represent chainmail and sculpted armor plates. Not all, but most of my time on this minifigure was spent painting the helmet, which, unlike Éomer, I used an official LEGO Rohan soldier helmet and went about painting as much accurate detail as I could get at this scale. I even included his sword and shield, which are also heavily modified and painted LEGO minifigure elements. To make a long story short, I'm extremely pleased with this minifigure. Almost 2.5 years later, King Theoden remains one of my most detailed custom LEGO minifigures to date. Here is the custom LEGO Éowyn minifigure that I originally wanted to make, disguised as Durmhelm. Like the other members of the Rohirrim, she has sculpted armor, some fabric elements, and lots of 3D details. They include the belts and straps, and some other armor pieces. The accessories are heavily detailed as well. The shield maybe was more complex than Theoden's, as I had to sculpt over the front of the shield to form the general shape. However, what I wanted to capture for this minifigure specifically was the helmet that masks her face. Now this was made by heavily modifying an official LEGO Rohirrim Soldier minifigure helmet. I sanded down the dome to achieve that pointed shape, and then I sculpted the faceplate and the additional layers around it. Overall, I think this custom minifigure still holds up, though I wish I did a better job on that hair. These next two minifigures were pretty tricky to source references for, but I still really like how they turned out. First, here's Merry in his Rohirrim armor. Like I said, it was difficult to find reference images of this costume, so I did the best I could. His armor sculpt is simpler than my other Rohirrim custom LEGO minifigures, but no less detailed. I think the chestnut highlights that I painted between the dark red armor look really great. The shield is a modified LEGO minifigure shield. I painted the silver details and sculpted the centerpiece. The helmet was the easiest to paint, but it was by far the most interesting to create, as this helmet didn't even start as a LEGO Lord of the Rings element at all. I actually started with a LEGO Star Wars Imperial helmet, and added all of the sculpting that you see, which included cutting out the back and reforming the shapes to add the leather-like details around the back. With this custom-made helmet, Merry within the Rohirrim ranks is one of my favorite custom LEGO minifigures in this collection, but I think I like the next one more, which is Pippin as a Gondor soldier. Of this duo, I prefer this custom minifigure for its use of the fabric elements and the painted tree of Gondor. Plus, the helmet is much better than what I was picturing making. It came from an off-brand Gondor soldier minifigure, and I just threw it on Pippin. The shield came from that minifigure as well, so likewise I gave it to Pippin, and it also looks great. Meanwhile, the sword is just a LEGO minifigure sword with a painted blade. I was really looking forward to making this duo in their respective faction attire. They are very unique in my collection. To complete the prominent faces in the Kingdom of Gondor, I also made Lord Denethor II, Steward of Gondor. This minifigure specifically taught me a very important lesson, which was to put more emphasis into researching characters that I'm not as familiar with, as I still get embarrassed when I remember I called Denethor the King of Gondor in my Return of the King custom minifigure review video. In the past few years, I've been a bit more careful when writing these videos to ensure that I represent my projects faithfully. As for the minifigure itself, I used painted fabric for his flowing robes, I sculpted the fur, and the sleeves. For the head, I used a LEGO Salazar Slytherin minifigure head, which I thought fit the expression I wanted for my custom minifigure of Jon Noble's portrayal of Denethor. As I was rounding off my Return of the King project, I wanted to make some more of the iconic representations of evil in the Lord of the Rings. So first, here is the Mouth of Sauron. Though only shown in the extended edition of the film, I still wanted to try my hand at making him as a custom LEGO minifigure. That said, he wasn't all too complex. I used the headprint and the molded crown from the original LEGO minifigure and just gave them a custom paint job. The rest of the minifigure is pretty simple, so there's not much else to say. The circular silver necklace charm used to hang from the 3D necklace, but I must admit, it broke off and I have no idea what happened to it. And as for his accessory, he has a sword which isn't even an official LEGO minifigure element, so I should probably correct that. Anyway, I never made my own custom LEGO Sauron minifigure, so I guess this inclusion in my collection doesn't make a lot of sense. Next is the Witch King of Angmar, and like I said in the Return of the King custom LEGO minifigure project, this character is a much better candidate to represent the agents of Sauron. I was incredibly intimidated to make the crown, so I was very excited when I found out I didn't have to. This minifigure would not have been possible without the work of Reverend Block on Instagram. The crown, armor plates, and even the spiked mace were made by them, and I just painted them gunmetal. As a matter of fact, I didn't have a lot of time to make this minifigure. I was coming down the wire on this project, so I just threw on some painted black fabric for the robes, and then I just let the Raven Block 3D pieces do all the talking. Finally, I also have a 3D printed sword for the Witch King. Looking back, I wish I did something different for the fabric robes or added more detail to him, because beyond that awesome looking helmet, there isn't much else to look at. In early 2024, I made 3 additional LEGO custom Lord of the Rings minifigures. These were the characters that I wanted to make but couldn't exactly fit into any of my project rosters. So first, I wanted to add the most famous hobbit of them all to my collection, Bilbo Baggins. I wanted to make the Sir Ian Holm version of Bilbo, so I based his appearance at his birthday party at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring. Unlike the other Hobbit custom minifigures I've made, Bilbo has sculpted hair on his feet rather than simple painted lines. The hairpiece is also unique and comes from Firestar Toys. For his accessory, I gave Bilbo a custom-made walking stick, and overall, I think he turned out very nicely. I wanted to make Lady Galadriel during my Fellowship of the Ring custom minifigure project, but ultimately I chose Arwen instead. All these years later, and here she is. I believe this custom minifigure marks the first instance of using a base white fabric that I was satisfied with. I used some other materials too, including white netting, and some other kind of silky fabric. I just wanted this minifigure to look as accurate as possible, but in hindsight, I would have rather I stayed consistent and used that same white fabric for the rest of the minifigure. I used the official Lady Galadriel headprint, and she has some sculpting on the hairpiece to match the hairstyle from the films. I'm glad I finally got the chance to make Lady Galadriel for my custom LEGO minifigure collection. The last minifigure in this custom LEGO Lord of the Rings minifigure collection video is Lord Elrond of Rivendell. He was pretty much the last member of the major cast that I had not yet represented, and plus, the dark red and gold color scheme is very appealing to me. First things first, I sculpted the metallic crown onto the recent LEGO Elf minifigure hairpiece, which was pretty challenging. Underneath, the face is completely painted. I was trying to replicate the headprint from LEGO Elrond's minifigure in 2012. I think I did an alright job. The rest of the detail was put into the fabric robes, and he was also one of the last minifigures to feature sculpted arm sleeves. As of now, Elrond is the most recent custom LEGO Lord of the Rings minifigure that I've made. I feel pretty satisfied with my current collection, so I don't see myself making any more. It was a lot of fun looking back at some of my older custom minifigures. Alright everyone, that was it for this custom LEGO minifigure collection video. If you watched this video all the way to the end, thank you very much. I spent a lot of time gathering my thoughts on these guys. If you have any questions, thoughts, or critiques, please let me know by writing a comment down below. Also, if you're interested, be sure to follow my social media platforms, where I post updates, behind-the-scenes looks at future projects, and individual photos of all of my recent minifigures. Links to my social media platforms are in the description. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you all next time.